Naombea kwa sababu nimeona kiongozi aliyekuwa mgonjwa kwa muda sasa. Nimeona kifo. Naombea katika jina la Yesu.
All right, some breaking news to bring you now. And the chief Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, has died at the age of 65. He was hospitalized last month after contracting coronavirus. The Palestinian Liberation Organization said Erekat required special care due to chronic health problems. He served as an advisor to Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and had been the Palestinians' chief negotiator in peace talks with Israel for 2.5 decades. Jamal El-Shail takes a look back at his life.
Saeb Erekat was a familiar face in Palestinian politics for 4 decades, and he saw tumultuous events from an early age. He was 12 years old when Israeli tanks rolled into his hometown of Jericho. In 1967, he witnessed a war that would last just 6 days, but which shaped the entire Middle East in the decades since. For Erekat, it would inform the decisions he made for the rest of his life. Erekat says he had to grow up quickly under Israeli occupation in the West Bank. His first arrest at the age of 13 was not his last. He attended university in the United States and moved to England to complete a PhD in conflict resolution. It was the beginning of his fight for Palestinian statehood through negotiation, advocating a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. It was a compromise and a major concession. But throughout his life, Israelis would accuse him of being an extremist and sowing division, while Palestinians would call him a traitor to the Palestinian cause, giving away too much. At the Madrid peace talks in 1991, he insisted on wearing the kufiya, the symbol of Palestinian national identity. He was a hero to many back home, but at the conference it caused a stir. 2 years later, he was left out of the final talks on the Oslo Accords, negotiated by Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. But Erekat would rise to become the chief Palestinian negotiator in 1995, resigning only for a time in 2003, reportedly in protest of the Palestinian leadership at the time. His strength was as the public face for the Palestinian cause, communicating across language barriers to explain their position to the English-speaking world, while also an acceptable voice of the Palestinian Liberation Organization to Israel. But over the years, he has described a growing pessimism at Israel's failure to deliver on its undertakings. At the building of yet more illegal Israeli settlements, increasing number of checkpoints, brutality against Palestinians, and the Israeli separation wall now more than 700 kilometers long. Peace talks, he would say, were out of sync with the reality for Palestinians on the ground. He remained loyal to Arafat even through his power struggle with Mahmoud Abbas, who is now president of the Palestinian Authority. Such was Erekat's popularity as a politician, he held on to his seat in the 2006 elections when Hamas won by a landslide. But with Hamas in power and Benjamin Netanyahu as Israeli Prime Minister, the chances for an agreement waned. 3 wars on Gaza followed. Erekat described it as the new dark age, saying that leaving the Middle East's most emotive conflict unresolved was simply fueling a regional descent into chaos and extremism. He turned his attention to the United Nations and was instrumental in the successful campaign to gain observer status for the State of Palestine within the UN. Throughout, Erekat remained convinced that the two-state solution based on the 1967 borders was still possible.
The real alternative to a state of Palestine living side by side the state of Israel in peace and security on the 1967 lines is one democratic secular state where Jews, Muslims and Christians can live equal, with equal votes. Those who believe that they can undermine the two-state solution and replace it with what I call one state, two systems, maintaining the status quo now, apartheid, I don't think in the 21st century they will get away with it. It's impossible.
Erekat was amongst the most critical voices of the US-sponsored normalization deals, which saw the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain establish full ties with Israel. He described the deal as the birth of Arab Zionism and said the agreement was like a poisoned dagger stabbed into the Palestinians' back. Saeb Erekat fought for an agreement between Israelis and Palestinians for decades. But for his last years, he was fighting his own battle. Lung disease kept at bay by an experimental drug. Eventually, he would need a transplant of both lungs. In 2007, he said he would hate to be a grandfather living under occupation. He wasn't able to change that.